I've been instructed that the meeting is in progress. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm John Feuerbach, chairperson of the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust. It is a joint meeting with the Manchester Housing Authority. Today's date being June 17th, I want to call to order the Affordable Housing Trust meeting and take attendance.
Gretchen Wood. Yep.
Sarah Mellish, Muffin Driscoll.
John Feuerbach.
Chris Olney.
Peggy Hagerty.
Joan McDonald.
That being a majority. Excellent. So I'll give the Housing Authority the opportunity to open up its portion of the meeting.
Wayne Persons, Chair, Housing Authority. Newly elected, thank you very much. I'm Gretchen Wood. I don't know, is anybody else on?
How can we tell?
No? All right, so it's just the
JB, I don't know who JB is. Jack Burke.
Oh. No. Okay.
So we're all set, one?
Yes.
Great.
There's a lot
And
of Manchester by the Sea.
We're good.
Mark Resnick, you are on, correct?
Yes.
I just saw him. Yeah.
Okay. The main item tonight is a discussion with Senator Tarr and Drew Tarr and Representative Ferrante's Research and District Director. We want to share some of the things about what the Affordable Housing Trust is doing, and we're also going to look for hopefully some support at the state level. But the senator's not here right now, so we're going to go to an item, and when the senator arrives, we can pivot and go to that item. So how about is there item the approve the meeting minutes of May 27, 2025? Folks have had a chance to read that?
Yes. And I had emailed Gail just to change some wording around a little bit with one item that I had said.
Okay.
So she had done that. So
Okay.
I'm good. I'm fine with the change.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All approved?
Aye.
Do we need to?
Oh, yes.
Do we do a roll call?
You don't have to because
We have everybody here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So all in
So
favor?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the meeting.
I also was not here at that last meeting.
Okay.
So, aye.
And Gail, you're on, correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Hello, Gail.
Is she the Manchester by the Sea?
So we have approval, but Chris Olney abstained and Joe McDonald abstained.
Got it.
Okay. Great. How about the treasurer report? Gail, please.
Sure. The only thing to report that's different is that we did roll over one of the CDs that we have into a 13-month at 4.25%. We'll have another one due in July that we'll have to roll over, which you all discussed at the last meeting, and we will do that to this one, whatever the rate is, whatever the best rate is we can get. The balance, is that what you want? Is $1,507,402. And that includes the money that is in our checking account as well as the 6 CDs that we have.
And it does not include the town-approved funds.
That's correct. We'll have that in July.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So new money in July.
And I don't think there's anything else to report.
Comments, discussion? No? Thank you, Drew. How about other business not anticipated by the chair? Discussion only. Is
How
there any-
about the committee structure?
We can do that. I'm just jumping around. I'm trying to figure out, is there anything that might relate to the housing authority? Since they're technically, we have an open meeting, if there's anything that worth sharing.
Only that we have a new executive director who will be starting on July 1st.
Oh,
She's from Gloucester. She seems very energetic and enthusiastic and has wonderful recommendations. So we're excited for that.
It would be great to have her at one of our
Yes,
next,
yes,
whenever she's
yes,
ready to
right.
join us. Yeah.
Do you have somebody to replace Beth on your board?
Well, no, we have
We
somebody.
did, but he declined. Took his oath and then decided it wasn't for him, so, no, we don't.
Okay.
I have an email from Beth stating that maybe you would be doing that, is that?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Oh,
For the CPC, somebody needs to be a representative from the Housing Authority,
Right.
right? It's been suggested perhaps that I would move to that position in the Housing Authority, and it would free up my position on the CPC for someone else to be appointed, since I do have interest in the Housing Authority, and
right there.
I'd be willing to do that. It really doesn't have anything to do with you guys, other than I would be that rep on the CPC.
Yes.
So we can talk about that, but I didn't know if anything else
Yeah,
had been
but
done
I
on
guess
that.
we probably just need to know how do you go about doing that? Do we need to have a committee vote? Do you know anything about it?
I don't know. I'm just throwing my hat in the ring. If
Yeah.
you need me,
Okay,
I can do that.
awesome.
If it's a joint appointment with the select board,
Right.
then I think she needs to submit a volunteer application
To the select board,
to
yeah.
Debbie Powers.
Is that how were you appointed by this?
I thought you said it had to be joint.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about being just the CPC rep? Like
From
the Housing Authority designee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I
You're
don't
not
think
talking
it's
about
this
Joining the.
No.
seat.
Oh, I'm
See
sorry.
that?
Yeah.
No, that's what I
That's
thought.
not clear. I did not
Okay.
make that clear.
That's all right.
Okay,
That's all right.
But we'll talk about how I guess that works for you.
okay, good,
Great,
thank you.
you. Sorry.
Any other? Please. Unanticipated? Okay. So MHT committee structure and members is the continuation of a discussion we've had, I think, in the last couple of meetings. We had some brief
Yeah,
discussion.
we kind of skimmed through.
Yeah,
and
and
then-
I think that I had originally suggested maybe we need to change it, but then Muffin gave us the existing paperwork
Yeah.
that says a representative from a committee or a designee, so that kind of accomplishes
Right.
what I wanted.
Each position says from the
Yeah.
board or a
A
designee,
designee.
so it does
Yeah.
cover the concern.
Right, so I don't think it's worth sending it back before town meeting, to make a change.
Okay.
Is kind of where I'm coming from.
So
Other
to
people may have a
clarify, and
different
also to
opinion.
clarify for my, so I'm on the same page. The structure won't, being appointed or a representative of a committee of Board of Selectmen, or select board, community preservation, MHA, FinCom, that will remain. But what we've determined through your research, thank you, is that
Well, it's a designee, right,
yes.
so in Sarah's example, if there is not someone on the finance committee, sitting finance committee that's interested in being the representative to the Affordable Housing
Yeah.
Trust, then the finance committee can
Find
find
Yeah.
someone and appoint
Some
them as the
flexibility.
designee.
Yeah.
And have them report back
And-
to the finance committee.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So that kind of settled that
Yep.
wonder.
Right.
The only other thing I put out there and wonder is, should we be looking to add, and it would have to be a change in the bylaw, to add a couple more community members, maybe appointed by the selectmen or add to the town moderator's appointment positions. If there's folks out in the community that have got some experience and could help bolster this current group, because we've been at it, quite a
For a
while.
while.
And we're still ready, willing, and able to tackle, but maybe, we don't know. Maybe there's people out in the community that
Yeah.
might want to get involved. It would be, we've got to stay with an odd number, so it would be
Yeah.
two
Two,
seats
yeah.
to get up to 9. I know some people struggle with, is that too many? I don't know. I don't have a perspective on that.
We had 9 on the MBTA task force,
Right.
and that was fine, and
Right.
it added a greater diversity
Right.
of ideas.
Right. So
Thoughts, discussion on,
that's the only thing I kind of put out there now.
Yeah.
And it would be an article at town meeting to adjust the
Yeah.
current setup. But this is the time, I think, to talk
Yeah,
about
no,
it,
no.
and if we had merit to it,
Yep.
it would just, we just have to push it along to the select board
So
for them to
I've got two
decide.
thoughts on that. One is, I have been very appreciative of having direct representation of members from the committees. I
Oh, definitely,
think
that wouldn't
The
change.
Affordable Housing, the Affordable Housing Trust, I think, has benefited from each of the members
Yeah.
actually engaging with their committee, and it's a two-way street, bringing information to the Affordable Housing Trust, but then also being that resource for the trust in those meetings, whether it be FinCom or the select board. I think
Planning.
there's been a
Yep.
value,
Oh,
a value to that.
definitely.
So if we were to go away from that, where we don't have like a FinCom rep, we have someone else, I think we lose a resource there that I think has been an important ally historically for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Mhm.
And then my thoughts on community structure 7, I think 7 is fine myself personally. I think the 2 appointees by the town moderator, I think get at, Muffin, what you're sort of getting at. And I think if someone wants to get involved, or if we want to pull on the experience or knowledge of someone, we can always reach out and they can be a participant. I recall when we first started this, we had a representative, I don't need to name a name, but he was an architect,
Mm.
and he shared some ideas with us.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a valuable contribution, but it didn't have to come, it didn't come through like a formal committee position. So that's just my thought.
Anybody else? Chris, what do you think? From your planning? Well, just from that board experience and all of the projects that have been undertaken and
No, I would,
with
I guess,
outside
I
resources.
would agree a little bit with John that there's a risk if you add more people, you may get less, what's the word I want to use, coordination.
Okay,
But I'd be open to it, if people are volunteering and they're going to be an added value to the trust, by all means, I think it's
right.
worth pursuing.
Did the planning board have alternates?
Well, it's funny you should ask. At the last town meeting approved
Right.
the addition of 2 alternates.
Yeah. Is that,
But that's really for public hearings.
Yeah, so they.
Oh,
When
yeah,
somebody
yeah.
Hearings
can't
moving.
come,
you gotta have the,
because you can
We'll
only
get a
miss
schedule
one.
and-
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
we have them on ZBA.
Yeah.
We use them because people can't.
Yeah.
Come every month.
But they are also a good way for people to learn what's going on with the organization as well. So,
yeah.
My observation is I think this committee has worked very well. So from my perspective, I don't think it's our lack of producing housing is not attributable to our specific members, our composition, and it arises from limited, if no opportunities in town, be it vacant buildings, vacant land, or a development partner who has a vacant building or vacant land and is willing to work with us and would pursue accessing our funding.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not why I
Yeah.
put it forward. I just thought the question came about like designee or whatnot. I thought,
Yeah.
well, here's the opportunity to just chat about another
Yeah.
option or idea, but, okay.
So hearing what Muffin has presented, is the committee okay with, in essence, as is? The language that you've demonstrated in our bylaw or whatever gets at that question of
Are we,
flexibility
Position,
within
right,
committee
yeah.
structure.
okay,
So,
great.
so there's no need for any further discussion on that? No vote? Yeah, right? I think
No,
we
no
just
vote. Yeah,
Thank
Okay.
you for your
Yep.
research. Okay. So now, Senator, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We introduced ourselves to you. If you feel comfortable, we have 2 chairs right here for you to come on and sit so we can engage.
I like it back here. Nice try.
Us 7, we can't fit around here.
it's called the hot seat.
Yeah, but that's why I wanted to be back there. Let's see if I can pull this up a little bit.
Just FYI, we have a camera that's shooting from a couple different angles, and it's being recorded for the benefit of folks who maybe can't make the meeting and want to listen. And there's also some folks who are tuning in via Zoom.
Great.
So,
It's a multimedia approach.
Yes.
I try to get my best side to the camera.
is that your good side?
You're all around.
It's getting all of your sides.
And they zoom in on you when you talk.
Oh, this is getting better all the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and Drew, representing Representative Ferranti, for taking time out of your evening to join us. This is our monthly meeting that we hold. It's the Manchester Affordable Housing Trust. And just as a quick background, the Affordable Housing Trust was established by town meeting in 2016. It was a warrant, and it was approved overwhelmingly by the town. And it exists as Article 21 of the town's general bylaw. And it's we are created for the purpose of creating, preserving, and supporting community affordable housing in the town of Manchester. The board, maybe we can just go around to introduce ourselves, consists of a representative of the Select Board, Community Preservation, Manchester Housing Authority, the Finance Committee, Planning Board, and then there's 2 appointees from the town moderator. Each one of those representatives bringing a little advice from each of their committees, knowledge from their committees, and sharing with the Affordable Housing Trust with the goal of promoting affordable housing. It's a joint meeting with the Manchester Housing Authority, so we have 2 representatives, one of which is a co-member of the Affordable Housing Trust, but then we have, go ahead and introduce them.
Lead persons, Gretchen Wood, Housing Authority, and Affordable Housing.
Sarah Mello, Chair of Finance Committee.
Muffin Driscoll, I'm the Board of Selectmen designate.
And then John Feuerbach, I'm the town moderator appointee. One of 2.
And I'm Chris Onley from the Planning Board.
Hi, I'm Peggy Hagerty-Steck, and I am a designee for the moderator. And thank you both so much for coming and working on arranging it so that we could all get together tonight. Appreciate it.
And I'm Joan McDonald, and I represent the CPC.
Well, let me just say, we're happy to be here and actually want to thank you for being proactive about housing production and affordable housing production. It's a remarkable thing for a group of people in a community to get together and try to change their posture and not be reactive and be taken wherever somebody might want to go, but to actually say we consciously, intentionally want to build affordable housing. So this is an amazing group, particularly with so many representatives of different organizations, reflecting that the entire town holds this as a priority. So Drew and I are happy to be here, and Margaret sends her regards too. And she's very committed to affordable housing, just as we are. So, thank you.
Just as quick background, when we were established in 2016, we spent a fair amount of time just getting to know the lay of the land. We met with all of the property owners of large properties in town to get a sense of what's the rental stock, what's the natural occurring affordable housing, and is there any way that we could work together with owners. We assess all available town land. We spent a fair amount of time in training. I forget what state agency that helped us, if it was, but they devote themselves to affordable housing trusts. So we spent a fair amount of time with a representative just getting to know the ins and outs of the Affordable Housing Trust. And then over time, we were able to bankroll money. Because you can imagine the difficulty of being Affordable Housing Trust, being a willing partner with the developer, and they're going to come to us for a rental development, and they're probably going to go to the state, and the state's always going to look for matching municipal or town funds. We have about $250. So we were limited in that regard early on. We've progressed over the time, and Joan has done a great job of, as our treasurer, accounting for the funds, but annually we've had favorable community preservation allocations, from 150 to 250,000. Most recently, a couple of months ago, I believe it was 200,000. At this point right now, we're at about, accounting for the new money in July, will be about $1.7 million.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we're in a position now where we could be a player, either individually or with a partner, to support community affordable housing. And as you can imagine, our funds would act as a subsidy. The developer comes in, I'd love to do it, but God, the development costs are here, the rents are going to be down here, sales prices going to be down here. I can't do it. Well, that's where we come in. We would make funds available to bridge that gap.
And I would speculate that you could play an important role in terms of increasing the number of affordable units by playing that role.
Yeah.
And also the affordability itself. So you're in a good position to be able to impact that.
Yeah. That's correct. Our charter, our bylaw is we're creating, preserving, advancing community affordable housing. So every dollar that we would spend would be to support that affordable unit. The unfortunate situation we're in now is, and we've knocked our heads and we've written to the cricket outlining the challenges, is we don't have any new unit to show for our work, and it's frustrating for us, and it's a product of there's no town land, whether it's vacant land or buildings, and notwithstanding our efforts to reach out to some developers, and we've had executive session where we've looked at 3 or 4 properties. We don't have a development partner who knocks on our door and say, Affordable Housing Trust, I've got this great site. I think it'd be suitable for community affordable housing. We want to start a process, but would you be there to help us with that process, but also be there at the back end for a subsidy? We haven't had success in that. So the combination of lack of town land and partners, it's led to the point where we don't have anything in the works right now. Anyone else want to comment on before we go into some of the points that we wanted to raise, the specific points that we want to alert you to, but then also ask for any assistance you could provide at
I
this
think
stage.
we should indicate that we have formed a sort of a partnership with the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Chris.
And the Housing Authority owns and operates about 80 units, I
80
think, in
units.
town. And of course, the state subsidy is not sufficient to operate them efficiently. And so we're hoping to work with the Housing Authority to create a development opportunity on some of those properties. And with the goal of making them self-sufficient so we don't really need to rely on the state anymore. But the sites are challenging, and so it's going to take some give and take, and I think some cooperation from EOHLC
See,
to get us over the threshold.
So I'm a little bit familiar with that partnership, and I think it's actually a fruitful place to go. Unfortunately, because of the subsidy situation and also the limitation on use of reserves, to the extent the Housing Authority can develop any reserves, makes it really hard for it to be entrepreneurial. So I think the partnership here might serve a number of purposes. Number one, it could make sure that the units are in good shape and well maintained. Sometimes it's hard to do that. Number two, there could be an opportunity to maybe increase capacity on Housing Authority land that's already in existence. And number three, the Housing Authority is a great ally to help you compete for things like Section 8 certificates, which can be really important here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good partnership. And when it comes to EOHLC, and we're all having a hard time getting used to that, we were all used to saying DHCD, right? And now and it sounds like the farmer in the dell, EOHLC, but I think that's an area that we would be more than pleased to work with you in terms of trying to create some flexibility and some innovation with regard to those relationships, because they certainly are aware of the problems with public housing stock and trying to catch up with deferred maintenance and trying to make sure that they stay occupied, because having them offline when they either aren't inhabitable or there's a long delay to repair them, that doesn't do anybody any good, and those are existing units. So that partnership, I think, is a good one.
The bump in the road for us was in assessing those sites, what we really need is additional land to make all the numbers work. And when we've talked with our local usual partners like North Shore CDC, Harbor Light Homes, the CDCs that are in our area, there hasn't been, at least historically, a lot of interest because it's a complicated project, and without more land to add more units and have it all sort of come together in a pro forma in a certain way, it hasn't been as viable. So we've worked with POA and other groups on it, and so we found, like, I think with where we're at right now is the lack of additional land so that we can add more units to make everything work for the whole EOHLC one-stop process is a stumbling block for us. But that was part of initially the idea, was because there is another project that's, I think, competing now for funding in Marblehead.
And Marblehead.
So we were we're trying to look more into that, but it's because it's not a typical sort of profile project. It's had its challenges, so that we've spent a lot of time on RFPs and RFQs and working with different developers and trying to package it. But
over the course of 3 or 4 years.
But like fundamentally, what it comes down to, based on all the folks we've talked to, is that there's just not enough to make it all make sense. So that was that's the roadblock we hit with that. But there's another EOHLC issue that's very hot topic for us too, if you want to go into the Powder House situation and the SHI.
We can transition to some of the points that.
Sure.
Okay. Chris, you want to take that one off?
Sure. So I've been asked to tell a story. And I'm not going to dwell on specific dates or actors, but I'm going to sort of tell the story of Powder House Apartments, which is an older apartment complex located near the downtown, 29 units. And it was naturally affordable. The rents were quite low because the units are small and the property was quite old. So I guess around 2020, I think 2019, 2020, a group of citizens
21.
in town, 2021,
Yeah.
got together and raised $2 million to help purchase the property with the goal of converting it to a capital A affordable housing complex. And they teamed up with the North Shore CDC, which became the owner. And when that was done, there was a deed restriction prepared, and the town prepared a LIP application, which is a local initiative program, to get the units listed on the SHI. So the town planner who put the application together left her job, and an interim planner was brought on board who helped bring the application forward a little bit. And then her contract expired. So the town hired a new planner, but that took several months. So there was sort of a lapse in follow-up as to what was happening. Then finally, the town did hire the planner, Mark Resnick, who's on the line here. Mark, you can correct me if I get things wrong here. But he tracked down the LIP application at EOLHC, and they determined that they were missing some items from the file. How those got lost, we don't know. They asked for a new application, which was submitted. In the meantime, the management company had gone out and leased the apartments. They created a fair market marketing plan, which the state required. The deed restriction was prepared and registered and so forth. So we thought we were all set. What apparently has happened now is EOHLC is saying, well, those units were leased without an approved fair market housing plan. We don't know.
You don't count.
So we don't know whether the plan, we assume the plan meets all of the state requirements, but the fact that they were trying to lease these apartments and had a waiting list and so forth, So this is going on now where it's still kind of caught in this situation.
It heated up probably about in the last 8 or so months. One thing that Chris didn't mention is North Shore, the CDC also had some staff change turnover.
Oh, that's right.
So
There were
this
staff changes.
application and this effort to get the units onto SHI was sort of lost. Probably in the last 8 months, and we really ramped it up. And North Shore CDC, to their credit, has been very active. Housing livable communities, they've responded, but the issue has been, notwithstanding the management marketing company being very reputable, big time, they do work down in Boston, the HLC knows them. They went and moved forward on their marketing plan. They've got income eligible qualified tenants into these. They are now affordable units, but because it wasn't vetted by HLC, we heard probably about a month ago that, sorry, we can't do that. What the guidance we were given is that you give us your affirmative marketing plan, you get an LAU approved. Once that's done, you can then start bringing in income eligible qualified tenants. And on a case-by-case basis, it could be counted towards SHI. So it'd be 1, 2. Right now, I think North Shore CDC has qualified, I think, at least 14 of the 29 senator and Drew. So
there is a complication here, which is this is being done backwards. Typically, the way these work is somebody builds a new project or is building a new project. They go to the state, get their fair marketing plan approved. Then they get tenants. The tenants move in that are income qualified. It's all done in this case, it's backwards. We have the property is already in service, and we already have tenants there who already are income qualified. So there's got to be some sort of flexible way that we can get this to work.
Is it fair to say that every other box is checked off? In other words, the LIP and the funding and the subsidy is not at issue?
There's no subsidy.
There's no subsidy. The marketing plan will be important. There's still a couple other factors, but we haven't heard anything in our conversations with HLC. It really has stemmed on the affirmative fair marketing plan, and specifically that you are asking us, state, to approve something retroactively.
So, but for that, everything else would be compliant.
I believe so. I think that's accurate. Yeah, I think that's accurate.
I think part of our experience too is that, people did a lot to keep that building affordable, and everyone knew there needed to start with that plan. And so time has passed and people knew, okay, we'll go through this process, then the units count, and then to be now told they don't count, it's the way it works makes it extremely difficult, especially for a small town with very limited staff, to do something that actually was something that benefited the community. So our frustration is that there's no sort of appreciation for that, or no, okay, let's figure out how to work it out. It's just like, oh, well, now you start here. And so people are extremely frustrated. And those units have been managed by an affordable housing management, like the Peabody Properties does probably thousands of units. And so it was all done properly. And then again, there were also changes in HLC with staff. So it's all been this, kind of perfect storm of turnover and confusion, because the way that it wasn't like, it was a town citizen-led effort. So I think that's sort of didn't slot into sort of how things typically work. And so now we find ourselves, and as a trust, we took it up because there's so much sort of bad feeling left in the community about it. So we, as a trust, tried to take it on to see if we could sort through where are the hangups, how do we just get this done. And so John has spent a lot of time particularly, and we've been working with North Shore CDC to try to just get to some reasonable solution. And so very recently we sort of got told again, no. So we were hoping that there was some way that maybe you and Rep. Ferrante could help us advocate or have a meeting about this to try to move the needle a little bit, because it does, I think in the community, it does make people maybe more reluctant for future projects, because I think folks felt like they did a lot for that project to be affordable, and still the town can't count it. So I think there's a lot of I think frustration about just how it all landed in the end, and it's been several years now. So that's sort of why we wanted to bring it to you all to
It
see.
seems like it's in a gray enough area where it could go either way. So what we, as
Mark does have his hand raised.
one second, Mark. The committee is at the point where we would ask for your help in perhaps meeting with the secretary. And if you need more information, we could have a sidebar meeting to give you a little bit more of the dates and the information back and forth. But perhaps a conversation saying, it was a good faith effort. This would benefit the town.
So number one, we're happy to do that. Number
Excuse
two,
me?
we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
We're happy to, I've been friends with Secretary Augustus for at least 20 years. So we're happy, and Representative Ferranti has a good relationship with him.
Nice.
So we're happy to facilitate that conversation. Number two, it sounds like the result that the plan was intended to achieve was achieved. In other words, you have the category of income tenants in the property, right? So had the plan been in place, that's what it would have been there to do, the marketing plan.
Yeah.
So it does seem like it really splitting hairs here to some extent.
Yeah, and they had a lottery. I mean, they had the plan, they had a lottery. They were able to fill the units, and now they have a bona fide waiting list. And but for like a stamp from the state, we wouldn't be, we'd be talking to you about something else right now.
So I also remember the atmospherics around when this initiative started. And there was increased awareness in town for a variety of reasons of the need to increase the SHI. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Right? And so this town did what many others have not done and said, we're going to raise the money and we're going to directly make an impact, and seized on an opportunity. So I can understand why it might have a chilling effect now if at the end of all of that, it didn't have the result that everyone intended and which the project met the criteria for. So anyway, that's a long way around saying we're happy to try to help. Mark has got his hand ready. I can't see him over my shoulder. I hope he's not like getting some sort of arthritis holding
So
his hand.
this is Mark Resnick, the town planner for the. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the LIP application was put in with all the proper advertising and all the information that they needed. However, it appears because the fair marketing plan wasn't submitted and some other information was never looked at by the EOHLC for a couple of years. And the thing that's missing here was the fact that they never held a lottery in order to create the waiting list. And so that's what they're saying now, that we have to start again and they have to hold a lottery. So it was EOHLC who never probably reviewed the application because it wasn't complete, and could have pointed out a couple of years ago that a lottery was necessary. Also, the management company and the North Shore CDC, who is an affordable housing organization, both of them also should have known about the issue of and a lottery was necessary.
Yeah.
So it seems it kind of slipped through the cracks. It never happened. And so now they're saying that's what you need to do in order to create a new list, and then you can start from that list.
Mark, I disagree a little bit about that. I saw it advertised in the Gloucester Times in 2021.
Yeah,
It was advertising about affordable units.
I think the issue is the lottery. The lottery is a component of the marketing plan. What the state is telling us is they did not approve the plan. So therefore, anything you do beyond that lottery. So the lottery, let's not get lost on it's more the bigger issue. It's the approval of the fair housing plan. And that's what's in question right now. And HLC has said clearly, you submit that, we review it, we approve it, then we could start. So the point we want to work with you on is perhaps there's a little flexibility that we could get through the secretary to help us out. I believe the North Shore CDC and Peabody acted in good faith. As you indicated, the results achieved what an approved plan would look to do, and that is to get income eligible qualified tenants into the building.
So the short answer is we're happy to help. I would say the absence of a lottery is somewhat more significant than sort of the rest of the marketing plan. But we're happy to have the conversation and see where we can go. And I do think that the effort here deserves recognition by HLC. The fact that all of this has happened and created housing and the housing is occupied, that can't be ignored. But
No subsidy.
yeah.
No subsidy, and it was.
Well, that's a sticking point for me because I think we're too myopic about the subsidy issue with regard to the SHI. That's why I asked that question. So, but anyway, we're happy to help.
Yes.
Happy to have the conversation. And again, just a one-page review of the situation would help. And we'll work to set up the conversation. And we will leave it to all of you as to who should be in that conversation on your behalf.
Okay.
We'll just grab each arm of the secretary and drag him to the table. Figure out who's on the other side of the table.
Okay.
So,
Before we move on to the next item, is there any other comments on this?
I just wanted to add another piece, and that is that we do have a fair number of naturally affordable units. And it's almost impossible for small landlords to go through the process of deed restricting them. And we've lost a 13-unit one, which was very affordable, and now it's going market rate. So that there's a void there, and we're talking small landlords.
The complexities of.
Yeah, and all the paperwork, everything that needs to be done, that it's difficult for a town, 5,500 people.
It's also difficult for the town to do the monitoring that is required. And I think there's a solution to all of this, which we'll talk about later. But
oh, good. Because it is a problem. And I think, too, for a smaller landlord, the idea of a deed restriction, depending on how they're financed, may be a very daunting thing.
yeah.
So we're very eager to hear the solution.
Okay. So after the meeting, we'll figure out a way we can get together to provide you more information with the goal of getting you comfortable so that we could organize a meeting. That'd be excellent. Nice. Okay. So the second item is an issue that impacts Manchester by the Sea. It impacts towns on Cape Ann and really small towns throughout the Commonwealth. It deals with affordable home ownership. We all know what the legislature and the governor, the cry for every town needs to do its part. I mean, Manchester just recently did its part. We approved the MBTA stuff, changing zoning. What can towns do to create community affordable housing? We've recounted our history and our attempts to create housing in this small town. In the event a developer comes to us and wants to pursue affordable homeownership housing, there is not a feasible path forward because there is no state program that will fund a project in a small town. Mass Housing, which administers the Commonwealth Builder Program, that is really the gateway for homeownership housing throughout the state. It's really just for gateway cities. It's for Boston, Salem. I don't think it applies to Beverly. Affordable Housing Trust, which is coming out of HLC, but it's administered through Mass Housing. It's a neutral program, but if you want to pursue Affordable Housing Trust funding, you have to go through a competitive funding round through HLC. Once it goes to HLC, you probably know as well, they have a lot of flexibility and discretion, and they don't use the AHT money for homeownership. They use it for special needs, for rental. A town like us, we do not have an avenue for subsidy money. We're fortunate enough to have a fair amount to match a homeownership application to Mass Housing, but we don't have any options. So that's our issue. That's an issue that goes throughout small towns that were non-gateway cities, and it seems to me a no-brainer to. I don't think it's a legislative fiat. That I think it's probably a departmental or a. Is this something we can get a 2-for-1 when we meet with the secretary?
So not only can we do that, but we recently passed the largest housing bond bill in the history of the Commonwealth, which puts money in a lot of different buckets
Yeah, that was fantastic.
for housing production. And I think we could have a very productive conversation with the secretary about how to make sure some of that money reaches the kind of project that you're describing. And there is, in my humble opinion, there is a bias toward rental versus home ownership, and that's even reflected in the 40B regulations. But we would be happy to have that conversation. I mean, usually the way this goes on our end is somebody has a project, and then we bring DHCD, now HLC to the table, and we piece together a funding package, and we've had success on a number of fronts. But as a standardized matter, as a structural matter, I'd be happy to discuss that because we have put a lot of money on the table, whether it be for the Mass Housing Partnership or any of those organizations, and we're happy to talk about that. There are also other things like the low-income housing tax credit, which is a saleable credit, which is often used as an avenue to get financed. So
that's what makes the rental possible.
Yeah.
The big projects,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
So we're happy to talk about it. I'm happy to acknowledge.
Is it simplistic, or to just almost frame it like, could we just make a change and take out the language gateway city? So a developer goes into the website and doesn't see that, and it's an invitation to do the work that I think we all acknowledge is needed throughout the Commonwealth.
Difficulty is that's going to take more than whiteout. It is that is a policy, and it's a policy that's been largely driven by the larger cities. As you know, the issue with the gateway city is the size of the population is one of the defining elements. We, for years, have been advocating, for instance, for Gloucester to be a gateway city because it has all the other attributes, but it doesn't have sufficient population. And so, to us, the distinction at times seems rather arbitrary, but we'd be happy to talk about how do we make sure that there's a pipeline for homeownership money. But I would tell you, if the scenario you described were to happen tomorrow, we would call HLC and put everyone around the table to try to make sure that that funding wasn't lost. But talking about it more in the abstract, we're happy to talk about how we could affect changes.
Yeah.
But it is hard when we talk about gateway city status. So there may be other ways to characterize it, but one thing that's certainly true right now, particularly with regard to the MBTA zoning situation, is that small communities all across the region are now being asked in a way that they haven't before to at least be hospitable to housing production. And so that's going to bring this more sharply into focus because communities are thinking about that in a more intense way.
Yeah, no, it's tough to ask the small communities, and in some cases, almost like push or mandate, and then you have a small community trying to respond, but there's not something there to support because it can't happen without the subsidy.
Understood. Understood.
Any other comments on that from here? So we can just leave that, or when we have our sidebar talks, we can maybe
We
figure
will-
out some way we can.
We will talk to HLC about it. B, if all of you or a subcommittee of all of you wanted to look at everything and brainstorm with us how to make structural changes, we're receptive to that. And, we can either request that the administration make regulatory changes, or we can pursue it through legislation. So we're happy to continue the conversation, but put this more under a microscope and say, okay, where exactly are the issues and where do we want to push? But again, I don't want to have a chilling effect, but the Gateway Cities thing is probably not our best avenue.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we can't make a case for smaller suburban communities to have greater access. And we'll go back and look through the Homes Act too and just identify those pockets and say, okay, is there an obstacle with this or an obstacle with this? But again, a point that I wouldn't want to be lost here is if the scenario you described happened tomorrow, we would be ready to step up and
Yeah,
act.
Thank you for that.
Have you had any of your other smaller communities come to you like this, or
Not around
Other-
this
other
issue,
trusts?
Muffy.
No. Okay.
It's more when it happens, a proposal pops up,
Yeah.
and we more rally around that particular proposal as opposed to doing something in an anticipatory way. But happy to think about it because this is an issue that's going to continue.
Yeah.
And if we can start the revolution here.
Well, it's like the voice of the small communities
Sure.
needs to find that opening.
Yeah.
And find the space to be able to talk about.
Yeah.
It's that so much of this housing law is one size fits all, and this is a group that's sitting here saying, that's not true.
Well, I think there's
not
politics,
true.
there's a big political thing going on, which is, I guess, pretty obvious. The big cities
Yeah,
have the more political clout than we do. So,
Yeah.
the question is, can we band together somehow and
right.
make maybe a regional effort to?
Absolutely. And that is exactly part of the political dynamic. And the larger, more urbanized communities feel like they have been doing more than their share for a very long time. And so they feel like it's now time for suburbia to step up to the plate. But the difficulty is because they've been doing it so long, and because they've done it through their lens, they don't necessarily see the challenges in the suburban communities. And so trying to build that understanding is an important goal here. Because, for instance, oftentimes the more urbanized communities don't really grasp Title V and get what it means to have decentralized septic treatment.
Sure.
Right? So it's a different scenario.
Yeah.
And so talking about that is important and trying to build that understanding and the other challenges that we face, right? So a lot of folks in suburban communities do want home ownership. They for a number of reasons, but one of them is to build equity if they're low or moderate income so that they can build a more financially sound household financial situation, right? So we need to talk about home ownership. I think we often think about rental, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think we oftentimes think about rental units as the fast way to address the problem, and home ownership is a little bit the slower way, right? But they're both important. And so having this conversation and making sure that as we are funding, as I said, historic amounts of money, making sure that we're creating tools that have utility for suburban communities is really important.
So one of the big issues, I think, is a structural issue, which is a city like Salem has got a planning department with trained staff and, time on their hands to put grant applications together. We have one town planner, and the housing authority has got a half-time director and a full-time maintenance guy, and they're just busy trying to manage their property. So they're not going to be able to put a grant application together. So we need the technical and
This almost sounds like a
Administrative
segue to a third point.
It's almost like this was planned.
Gretchen, that was sort of a lead-in from Chris.
Yes, so I'm representing the Housing Authority. A few things, what was just mentioned, the fact that we have 3 separate housing authorities in 3 separate sites with one executive director who works 24 hours, is paid for 24 hours a week. I know she works way more than that on her own time. And an assistant who works 17 hours a week. We have a maintenance man, one maintenance man for all of these 40 hours a week. There is money for a 15-hour-a-week assistant, but we haven't been able to fill it because pay isn't wonderful. We have
I think she
something.
just hired someone for that.
Oh, good, okay. I take that back.
See, we're already making progress.
15 hours doesn't, you don't get to do very much.
Yeah.
You don't get paid, you don't have benefits, so it's hard to
Yeah.
find somebody to do that.
Yeah. So one of the problems is and I know you're probably familiar with this, the state list that you may have heard about.
Yeah.
It is so time consuming. The executive director, I'm going to say she probably spends a third of her time in the office trying to follow all the duties of that state list. And huge amounts of mailings having to be done, costing us all money. It's so cumbersome. It doesn't apply to, again, it's the big versus the little. We're a little housing authority. These things that the state demands are way out of line with what can be provided, with what they're willing to pay for. It's just, anything you can do. I know it's ingrained, but.
Well, no, so I actually would say this, and I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah, that's right.
So Champs came about as a way to try to make it easier and centralize the application
Right.
process, right? But in the end, it made it more complicated. So it sort of had the opposite effect. So the legislature has said to HLC, you have to do better. And they've been at work to try to reform the system, right? So one of the things that we've learned from talking to housing authority directors, including yours, is that sometimes you're running multiple lists for a single unit. And sometimes folks will apply for that unit without the intention of being in it because they have to apply for everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
yes,
so
absolutely.
what winds up happening is the person that applied winds up getting the unit in theory, but they don't take it, so now it's vacant.
And now
So-
the whole
And
list
exactly.
starts all over again.
Exactly.
And if they do that 3 times, then they're sent back to the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
So
So,
it's not good for them.
Right. Yeah.
It's not good for us.
yeah. So there is, I'm pleased to tell you that there is work underway to simplify and reform the system and make it more practical, particularly with regard to regionality and not having someone from Western Massachusetts have to
Yes.
apply for
Yes.
something in Eastern Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
And also this idea of multiple lists. And there's some thought of trying to take back some of that burden from the local housing authorities. And if there is going to be a centralized system, have it be managed by HLC. And so that's one thought that's out
Yeah.
there.
That would be
So-
amazing.
But I can tell you, that people are listening on this
Good.
one. And we've heard it from a lot of folks. And we know we need to do better. And I think there's a compromise to be had here about trying to be inclusive, but also trying to be practical.
I think the original reason was to be inclusive,
No
which
doubt.
is fine.
No doubt.
We have no quarrel with that. But,
The priority of the list is very difficult too. So most people who live in these units don't understand why that priority is set that way.
Sure.
I mean, you get the veterans, you get people who are homeless, people who have a disability. So there's 5 or 6 categories in that
Yes.
list that they have to go
Yeah.
through. It's like,
Yeah, and 2 separate lists.
that's
right.
a lot of
Well,
time.
That's the
Yeah.
biggest problem we've heard is multiple lists
Yeah.
for a single unit
Yeah,
and how counterproductive that is.
it's very time consuming. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no,
I'll
it's great.
report that back.
And we'll keep you posted, and also if there's anything further, if there are suggestions, Gretchen, that folks want to send
Yeah.
to us, as this is a work in progress, we're happy to receive them.
Good.
And see, so,
Okay, I'll tell Irene that.
complete.
What I've heard is that the units are old and the state support received, it doesn't really get to the point of meeting maintenance, so it almost sounds like it's a long delayed maintenance issue.
So,
We
yeah.
got very
it's-
hopeful when we heard about the, you mentioned the bond,
Yeah.
the bond,
Yeah.
a year and a half, 2 years ago. Is there any advice or is there any avenue that the MHA should be pursuing to try to get additional resources to address rehab within the unit? And then the second part is, I think where they're leading is, even if they did have that avenue, the capacity for them to do that is limited
There's no
because
time.
they don't have time and they don't have the staff. So what I've heard Gretchen say is there anything at the state level where technical assistance coming maybe from HLC could be provided to a locality to help them put an application forward?
So let me try to answer those multiple questions in series. So, I would be surprised if there were programs that Irene, the executive director, wasn't already aware of. But we did put money in the housing bond bill for deferred maintenance, of which there is a ton across the state. So that's working its way through. And if there's an issue accessing that, we'd be happy to talk more about troubleshooting that.
Right.
But that was our intent, was to get at, the roofs, the windows. We've heard an awful lot about the older generation of split units that were installed heat pumps that have had problems.
Yes, yes.
Go.
Gosh, yeah.
Essex. It seems like, Satan's name should be written on the front of the unit. So we've heard a lot about that, but we are trying to work through that. So we're happy to talk more if we need to try to access that. And, also, whether there might be CPA money through the CPC for that is important.
CPC will not give us any money.
Okay.
They refuse us every year. We
Okay.
apply and they.
Okay.
Not by choice.
Right.
No.
Right.
Okay, and so,
It's a
Doesn't
prohibition.
fit.
It's a
It's a
prohibition.
prohibition,
Yeah.
yeah.
but there might be, we'll look for other sources as well,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't want to miss the big opportunity that we think is out there as a result of the passage of the bond bill. So happy to talk more about that.
And I think you weren't here when I announced that we have a new executive director starting July 1st, so Irene won't be there anymore.
Oh.
Sadly.
She's retiring. yeah.
Yes.
For the second time. She retired once. We took her back. She's been amazing, and I will say, though, if there's anywhere there's money to be had, she knows.
That's why I'm
Yeah,
saying
she's
that
really
She
good.
does.
I
She's
would
good.
be
She's
surprised if,
wonderful.
we could pull up the carpet and say, oh, did you know about this?
Oh, no, she
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah.
She's really
She's
good.
already had the carpet
Yeah.
pulled
And
up.
she's really ready with that every time we have a meeting.
Yes.
Oh, this just became available.
Yeah.
She's really up.
I think the problem is the age of the facilities. It's putting out a lot of fires.
Yeah.
You might plan to spend money on such and such to upgrade it a little bit, but then instead the pipe bursts or it's almost like your own house.
The maintenance
You know,
priorities
you
get
have
askew.
to- These
Yeah.
things that are just so old, let go, and then that money has to be spent to correct that.
So can I give an example of the kind of thing where you might be able to help? So these properties are L's for seniors. They're, but the second floors are all walk-up. And it's going to be impossible to put in elevators because of the way the buildings are configured. So one of the ideas we were tossing around is, can we build a replacement for the seniors, in a new building with an elevator, and then use the old structure for regular, family, small families?
Yeah.
They're all one-bedroom apartments, but there are plenty of people who need a one-bedroom apartment who aren't seniors. But we get the sense that the state will say, no, those are senior units and you can't change them.
I think we can have that conversation. Because in the end, it nets us more capacity,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like a one-for-one replacement too. It's not like we're taking away, we're,
right.
Yeah,
And adding
Yeah.
accessibility.
that's what we've been following. That's part of the plan we were talking about earlier, identifying Affordable Housing Trust, working with the Housing Authority on the Plains, Newport Park, and Loading Place, the three MHA sites, to try to get new construction, new buildings, and maybe in a case, spin off some cash flow to help with the maintenance that we're talking about that hopefully we can pursue through the housing bond bill.
and I also wonder whether there might be a partnership with a developer there too.
Undoubtedly.
tried.
Yeah.
Good.
We'll have one more attempt at a request for proposal. We've issued 2 so far. And we've got good guidance from a consultant in the last 8 or 9 months, like ways to improve language in the RFP. We've got a little bit better direction on the available land and what would be a buildable area that I think might be more attractive to a developer. And not be as prescriptive that you got to hit all 3 sites. Maybe you just want to do 1. Well, let's bring them on rather than, I'm sorry, you can't do it because it has to be all 3.
And I'm guessing from the conversation that was going on when I came in that there isn't that much opportunity for adjacent land on any of the 3.
Tough.
Yeah.
We have a lot of wetlands.
Well, that was the other question that came up too about state land.
This
And
is
I think
segueing
the
into
governor also
our
had
fourth
recently
point.
talked about.
It's almost like this was
state-
planned.
Go ahead.
No, it's just that's where we got hung up on this project, and I know that the governor even recently was talking about releasing state land, but I think as far as we can estimate, we don't know that there's really much in our community, and so trying to figure out, is that even an option? Because if we had some piece of land somewhere where we could add more units and make it all balance out to get a developer on board, that would be ideal, and then we could help with the existing senior units that the Housing Authority oversees, as well as add units. So I don't know if you have any secret information about mystery state land that no one else has.
Actually, Peggy, it's the opposite of secret. We have public information. So,
Public information about state land.
so the governor had issued an executive order directing DCAM and others to do a search. And I think Drew actually has the list.
I have this is the housing bond bill, but there were just a couple interesting notes on that. There's $30 million authorized for state surplus property disposition. So that's something we can certainly look into. And there were some public land disposition reforms included in that bill. We can take a look at that in adjacent with looking for, see if the land is available.
But the list is public, and we took a look at it, and we didn't see anything right up front in Manchester. I will tell you from time to time, the issue of the DOT highway facility comes up.
That's
But-
the
Plant
beast.
that too.
I find it every day.
No, but
Plants in.
It's the one on Pine Street.
yeah.
You see,
Yeah, but
outbound on the
there's
right.
been a lot of reluctance over the years to relinquish that because it would be hard to build another one or put it in another place. But that's the one that most often comes up in these kind of conversations.
Is
So
there some rest area along 128 that might?
Yeah,
There used to be.
where was it?
There used to be.
yeah,
Between Pine and School.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
So is it
Kind of
your,
like at the end of Old Essex Road.
Yeah.
right?
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
is it your sense then that the Pine Street one, it would be difficult to?
Leverage.
it would be. But again, it might be if we could identify another
place.
area where that could go.
Yeah.
That might not be suitable for housing, but would be suitable for
The
a
function?
DOT facility, then that's certainly a possibility.
That old rest area
So, yeah, I'm curious about that.
between Pine
End
and
of Old
School.
Essex Road. It's between Pine and School.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Another story that.
Yeah.
I think Mark.
Yeah.
On
50 years ago.
on
it was a
128.
resto.
On
Well,
128?
there was a lot that went on in
You know
there.
what might help with that? If you all could get an assessor's map description of that parcel.
Mark has it.
Mark has, yeah. Mark, are you there?
Just unmute.
You're muted.
There we go. Yes, So I did send some maps around.
Yes.
With the state land, there was 2 parcels between Pine and School Street, which were on the northbound side of 128.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
the one
Yes.
we're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay. So we did locate those.
Mark, could we get that from you?
Sure, yes, of
And
course.
then we could explore it a little further?
Mm-hmm, yeah,
That would be great.
yeah, I can email it to you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are there any other state lands, Mark?
Based on the maps you sent, anything that's promising, worth discussing?
Not really, I mean,
The Pine Street one.
No, not really. There's very little state land in Manchester. The best one is that Public Works property. And also interestingly, there was a national, well, it's not National Grid, I think it was New England Power property right next to it, which is also appears vacant. So if they could be combined.
No, on the Pine Street, on the Pine
Okay.
Street.
Anything else on the question, point of state land? Is there any, I'm not segueing into any other.
You're not going to make me believe that.
I think we've given you enough homework.
Seamless, is there any other point?
I do have my proposed solution to some of this, which is regionalization, which you were pointing out, Senator. Why don't we have a Cape Ann Housing Authority? And why can't we provide money to a site in Essex that we could get credit for? I mean, they're close by. Essex might have land that's perfect, but they don't have any money. We've got money. Why does the 40B have to say just in this town when it's a regional problem?
I will tell you that has been proposed in the past, so it is not unheard of. It hasn't made it yet.
What were some of the roadblocks to it making any progress?
I think that the feeling generally was that it's hard for a sound agreement for one community to control what's happening in another,
Okay. Yeah.
number one. Number two, I think there's a moralistic kind of flavor to it about, well, you shouldn't be able to just get out of this by paying
Okay.
someone.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
and the answer to that is, well, if you don't have the land, how do you build the housing?
Yeah.
Unless you want to, put it on floats and put it in the harbor. I mean, where do you put it? They're not making any more land. So, but again, as this conversation progresses, people are willing to think about new dimensions to it, and that may be one. And last week, I heard some scuttlebutt about that idea with Manchester and a neighboring community. So, and I am going to leave you in suspense on that one, but I think that it is not a concept that's unheard of, and I think as we're pressed harder and harder to create housing in every part of the state, there will be a willingness to look at those kind of things in a way that there has not been before. I mean, part of the issue is that this is New England, and everybody thinks provincially about this is a community. It must solve its own problems, and a great example of how we're starting to think past that is with the issue of water, where we have a regional task force that's making great strides, and Manchester has contributed significantly to it about how we can have regional water solutions. So as we think about that, then this might be a nice analog.
Well, I know, for example, the Essex Housing Authority is contracted with Gloucester to manage their properties. And I guess Marblehead with Salem.
Salem.
They're addressing their stock of housing, and they're creating some new units similar to the plan we're trying to get off the ground. They've designated a developer. Yeah.
I think there may be opportunities for that. I think one of the issues that we can try to help with is that if you're trying to be innovative and pioneering, it's hard to do it with a small planning department and very few municipal resources. But I think we can work on helping to bring some help to bear on that. And one conversation, if it hasn't happened yet, that I would encourage is with MAPC. Because MAPC has been very helpful in a lot of these regional kind of issues and efforts, and is very sensitive to trying to bolster the resources that small towns don't have to be able to look at these kind of issues. And we can help set up that conversation with the right people. And so, they're looking at a bunch of issues for us right now, water being one of them, potentially emergency response for another, and maybe others. So we'd be happy to, I think you'd find it valuable to talk to them, and they may be able to unlock some grant money for you too.
That's great.
They helped us initially when I referred
Yeah,
to.
In the very
It was
beginning.
MAPC. They spent
Very
a
beginning.
couple
Set
of
up the
depth
trust
sessions.
to get it
Yeah.
Right.
rolling.
I want to be respectful of both your time. If you have a couple more minutes, I just want to respect our public here, and if they might have a question or a comment they might want to share with you. If you don't, it's no problem, but
No, we're here, and Axel's been very quiet, so.
So far.
Is there any- this is an opportunity for if there's any comments or.
John, you don't expect me to speak up now, do you?
That's enough. Next.
Darn! I blew it again. This is very frustrating to me because we've had an affordable housing trust for 6 years. They got $1.5 million now. And you know the number of new affordable housing units they've produced? 0. These are all good people. They all have the best of intentions. They want to see this happen. I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied. The reason the group of folks got together and wrote checks, and I was one of them, to buy the Powder House was that frustration. And so the fact that Ed Augustus seems to want to keep it off the subsidized housing is really frustrating. So we need somebody with your expertise, somebody who can talk like
I was waiting to hear what adjectives we were going to
we do need help. I mean, we'd love to get Powder House on. We've only got 5%. We're supposed to have 10%
Yeah,
affordable.
yeah.
We're not getting it done.
Yeah.
And so we are, right in the target for the 40B guy who wants to come in and screw things up. And I'm not against all 40B. The one in Manchester, I think, is not right. And so we do need help. And how was that, John?
Thank you, Gar.
Okay.
So we're here to help. And the representative and I, we have a very solid partnership, and we're happy to help.
Right.
Happy to.
I see Jody. Get your hand.
I'm Jody Morse, married to this guy. So I have an idea of this as well. And it gets back a little to what Sarah was talking about earlier about taking existing stock. We look around and we all know what housing costs are. We know how much it is to build a house. Seems like the legislation, certainly the 40B legislation, and certainly what we've experienced with Powder House Lane, is that people don't really know what to do with existing stock as far as getting it to be subsidized or getting it to be deed restricted. There aren't rules that kind of dictate that. So you're kind of stuck and you feel like you're in a merry-go-round trying to kind of fit, the proverbial peg in the square hole or whatever. So it seems, I don't know if this is a legislative issue, whether it's just a regulatory issue with the EOHLC. What it is.
You did well with that.
Better than me.
But I had an experience, I'll be very quick, about 10 years ago. We owned a small apartment building in Manchester. And Gar and I said, why don't we just put a deed restriction on this and, make it affordable. All of our tenants are qualified. We'll just put a deed restriction on because we're also seeing a lot of places being bought up, gentrified. Now all the rents are $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month.
And we were not trying to get a tax deal.
And
We were going to just do it.
Well, we were going to do it. Maybe we could get, I don't know, maybe we could get something. I don't know. We could put a new roof on. We've already done that. But anyway, so I actually went and I talked to a number of people at the DHCD
Yeah.
And I talked to a number of people that were running housing departments around the state. And I finally had one guy, I don't know, he was from Lowell or Lawrence, and I explained to him what I was trying to do. And he said, I got to tell you, I recommend that you don't do this. There's no way you can do this. The marketing plan is going to cost you $25,000 to rent your 7 units. So now we're getting back to this regionalization, not in kind of saying, let's put different properties or let's have a Essex property get to come for RSHI. Just administrative help. You can't buy a house that has 2 units in it and make it affordable.
Good point.
You need to have some kind of regional, just do the marketing plan for us. Send us the tenants. Do that work. Because we've got a lot of opportunity in Manchester. You can sometimes pick up a house that's older and make it affordable. But it makes no sense for a landlord to do that. So that's an administrative issue where I think we could actually have an impact. And every month, there's a house that's bought and gentrified in Manchester.
That is a great point, and it particularly speaks to the lack of land. So if you can take existing structures
Yes,
and bring them into the fold,
yes.
it's a way to get there that you can't with just outright development. So that is a great point.
Yeah,
And we're
because
gonna-
there are a lot of people that are wealthy enough to buy any property in Manchester and be able to build a fabulous house on it.
Yeah.
So don't have them buy a little house, make it twice as big on the lot, which everybody doesn't like this in the village anyway, because it ruins the village. Keep those houses the way they are and keep them affordable.
So if we could help small property owners with all of the bureaucracy,
Oh,
that would be a path.
It would.
Yes.
We're gonna
Yes.
brainstorm on this a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and we as the Affordable Housing Trust would be willing to, pay some of our money in to help subsidize that
We've
effort.
got $1.5 million in the bank doing nothing.
Learning interest.
All right.
One of the elements that we have out, we have it on our website, and we've talked about it, is we would work with a property owner to convert their market unit, market building into affordable housing. We would have funds to make that possible.
Well, let us ruminate on this idea a little bit, because it's a horse of a bit of a different color, right? Because we're talking about paperwork and soft costs and not 2x4s and foundations, right? So, but it could be extremely effective in getting the units that we can't get another way. So let's give us a little bit of.
I think it's also being done in larger cities. I think there was a project that we read in the paper like a couple of months ago in Boston where they took an existing building and renovated it, and actually the same tenants stayed there. That was the other thing I was told. You have to evict all your tenants in order to do this.
Even though they qualify.
So let's create homelessness to solve it.
Exactly. So I think that some of the rules are a little bit backwards.
That is a rule thing that came into play with Powder House too. It's like, you don't set out to create affordable units just to dislocate, displace people. And so I think that's like, it affects a lot of pathways. And so I think that's a key one as well. It's just how do we find a way to do a process that makes the unit count without, really disrupting somebody's life unnecessarily. I mean, if they qualify, they qualify. And so I think that's the part with the lottery and the marketing plan where everybody gets hung up, because that would mean waiting for that person to leave, which will be years, and then starting then. So it's all this delayed counting of the units, which seems to be more of a technicality than an actuality. Someone is living there affordably and they do qualify, so it should count.
And I think that we have some landlords in our town who have had tenants for many, many years, and they can't afford to pay much more rent. So the landlord does not raise their rent. So the idea of having to kick them out is very difficult.
Well, and I mean, there's the landlord-tenant relationship is important, and there's value in having a good, reliable tenant. And some folks are willing to not raise the rent to keep that relationship. That makes perfect sense. This is sounding like a conversation that we need to bring Andrew DeFrancis from Harborlight. We're gonna run this by him.
That'd be great.
think we might have some elements here.
Yeah, no, we have, he's been a great resource for us.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
The man sleeps for 1 hour a year. Unbelievable. But I think this idea has a lot of potential.
North Shore CDC has been a good partner.
Mark,
I think, Mark, do you have your hand up?
Yeah,
And then we
well, I just, we've discussed this before a couple times that if there was some sort of grant program that could help supplement we're a town that has some funds, but we can't do a small project even all by ourselves, and that we need some grant assistance. And the problem is, small towns like us, we're not going to create enough units to really qualify for any of the current grant programs. And I'm sure there are tons of small towns that are in the same predicament where they could raise some funds through CPC and other sources to assist in the acquisition and renovation of housing, existing housing, for affordable units, but they don't have the technical resources, or the state grant programs really aren't set up for a small town. So, perhaps that is something that could also be looked at.
Well, everything's run through housing livable communities, their funding round, which you have to be a nuclear scientist. It really is arduous. And they'll say, well, the reason why is because our time is precious. We need to have a project that has been vetted. You got your development team, you've got your project budget, you got your financing. Everything's going to be brought in, and that basically does favor the cities like Boston and others. But a small town, I think Mark does make an interesting point. We're not going to put in a 45 to 80 unit building. I mean, I worked out in Boston for 34 years, and we were doing that like all the time. But in here, talking to Andrew DeFrenza, he looked at a property that Chris and I took him to, and he said, 23 units, but it's probably not going to be competitive at HLC. So that's it. I think that is an important point, the difference.
And the other thing, what I tell Gar when he complains all the time about not doing anything, is
I'm going to keep them.
we have enough money to do one project, maybe. We could maybe buy a house, and that would be it.
Yeah.
So it's very, to try to maximize how we can use those dollars to maximize the number of units is tough to do.
The subsidy for a single affordable homeownership unit will probably be in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $400,000.
Yeah, I don't definitely.
Yeah.
We've got $1.7 million. We've been trying to hold that in hopes of the MHA plan, the Affordable Housing Trust Plan, attracting a developer, creating new units, and we would have a very attractive matching funds that a developer could take to the state to pursue a tax credit finance deal. Hopefully that will.
Yep.
I'm not giving up hope on that, but it's taken longer than I would have thought.
Let's hope that the next solicitation will be successful. But in the meanwhile, you've got some other irons in the fire here that are at a fairly concrete level. But we also have this idea of trying to supercharge a buying existing unit program and converting them and making it cost effective to do it, so that you're not spending all outdoors to be able to create an affordable unit.
Yeah.
So that's something that really is worth some more energy. So
Well, I'm going to take the liberty to close this portion, unless there's any other item you would like to discuss with us.
the only thing I wanted to hear is how Gar feels about the progress that's been made. Because that didn't quite come through. But other than that, we want to say thank you because, again, this is an important issue to us, and we want to work with you, and we really appreciate the conversation, and we really appreciate the investment of yourselves that all of you are making in this. It really speaks volumes about the town, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we'll reach out at Sidebar in the same manner we did to arrange the meeting, to create like a follow-up I know on the Powder House, getting the information that you had requested in hopes that maybe we could work together to meet with the secretary.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I haven't seen you in forever.
I know, well, I'm winding down.
I don't believe that.
Jesse will always be here.
We still have.
Yeah, we have a close meeting.
We'll just let our guests depart.
Yeah.
Have a good night, you guys.
I'll follow up by email.
Can't imagine what we're going to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Great. Before we close the meeting, is there any comment, observation that you want to share based on what we've heard?
Strike while the iron's hot with Bruce and
Yeah.
Drew and Ann Margaret. And see if we can't get in front of the secretary.
I think that line of thought too, just around post MBTA zoning, like that's a really clear point, you know, so now towns have changed zoning, people are looking to suburban communities to be doing more. So how can the state meet towns where they're at and help give the support?
Yeah, you got
Give the support so that, you know, because it is the difference between a city like Cambridge, for example, or Lowell or whatnot that have, you know, a big team that's working on these projects and have all this expertise. It's all the small towns, just like Manchester, in the same boat. There's not enough capacity to be competitive, and the size projects that we're doing won't be as competitive because there's a whole laundry list of priorities within, say, that one-stop process. And if you don't check all the boxes, I mean, you wait quite a long time. So we could even get a project together and go in for it and spend many cycles before we get any funding
The rules
support.
will have changed.
Right. I mean, that's the challenge for, but I think particularly, you know, when you're further afield of Boston, like we just don't have the same supports, we don't have the same transportation, we don't have all the things that they want to see in a project sometimes. So it's really challenging to find like the right site with all the things that make you, that is doable, but also make you competitive for the funding.
The regional piece, Chris, is interesting, and it seems like that's beginning to take hold again out in Western Mass. A lot of those smaller communities are doing a lot of regional partnerships. For some reason, this side of the state is struggling with the regional concept for anything.
I don't want Gloucester taking our water, for God's sake.
No, I don't want anybody taking
No,
our
but on
water.
the smaller, but you know what I mean, like on this point, on a smaller scale, it's,
On that one there, regionalization, I heard, my takeaway was use MAPC.
yeah, to
As
try
a
to help
resource
us
that-
I think it's a good start.
encourage other
Because
small
we've used them
communities.
quite a bit.
Yeah,
Could
Yeah,
we
they have
maybe
been
like while we're still meeting, do like a recap so we have like a joint list of like the
Yeah.
follow-up items?
I
so
just,
that-
on Powder House, I jotted down, reach out to the senator and to Drew, get them information, background on Powder House, nothing fancy, like a one-page,
Yeah, they asked for a one-page,
one-pager, yeah.
yeah.
So that we could bring them up to speed and then possibly meet and discuss with them if they've got any further questions, in hopes that we could then use them to schedule a meeting with Secretary Augustus, who's the Secretary of Housing and Political Communities.
Yeah.
And he so happens to be on the board of the mass housing as well. So when we talk about, God, we need to get some type of home ownership,
Right.
he has board members too.
I think that the one pager to Bruce and me and Margaret's office would launch them to get us a meeting.
Okay,
Because then they're gonna have
I can work on that.
what the office is gonna want.
I guess we should clarify what that fair marketing housing plan business is. It'd be interesting to see if the plan that's in place meets all the criteria. It just hasn't been.
You would think it that would if it's Peabody Properties.
You would
You
think.
would think so. There was a couple holes that they mentioned, but they didn't really get into those specifics because they kept on coming back to, you're asking us to approve it retroactively.
Right.
So they were staying on that broader issue. They didn't go down the rabbit hole of, if you had done this, they mentioned a couple of points. I have to go back to my notes.
So one pager about just Powder House and what the status is or the challenges in getting it on the SHI, is that the?
Yeah. And then,
So that's first to Senator Tar and Rep. Ferrante.
Yeah.
With the request of the meeting with
I'll
EO.
I'll send it out to folks. I
Okay.
can use my main editor here to my left. We tend to be a good team. He throws at me, I throw it at him. So
The suggestion I would make is to try to use bullet points.
my middle name is bullet points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to want a lot of
Oh, tell me
detail.
about it. Yeah, no, definitely.
I will say, I'm encouraged to see that Bruce was really,
Listen,
Yeah.
he was
yeah.
really
Thinking.
thinking
Yeah.
Yes.
about it.
Yeah.
Not that he doesn't other times, but I know
Yeah.
Peggy knows
He's
what I
very
mean.
engaged.
Yeah, no, he's great.
We definitely planted some seeds from the perspective of a small community, which is, in my opinion, the piece that's missing on the state level. The laws have been passed, the mandates are in place, but it's they have laid it down as a one-size-fits-all, and we're sitting here looking at our representatives saying, that's not true.
Yeah.
And it now becomes his and Ann Margaret's role
Yeah.
to go back and
As-
start talking about that in the hallways.
as reflected in that statewide list for the MHA.
Well, that's.
Which makes
I'm
zero
thrilled
sense.
to hear that they're
Every
talking about.
day,
Yeah,
it's hard
that's
to,
encouraging.
So why isn't that part of the mandate? If there are other towns that have coupled together, we'll say, why isn't Manchester doing that with someone now?
What do you mean coupled together?
Like Salem and,
Well,
Are you talking about for the housing authority?
Yeah.
Well, because that's what we just went through with hiring someone.
right.
We had one person who wanted, that's management.
but that's also a choice you
Okay.
guys could take up. My sense is
We had two people apply, one was
Yeah.
management and one wasn't.
Yeah.
But in questioning the one who was going to be management, there was absolutely no advantage to us
Yeah.
to have that. That's what it turned out to be. And we were, actually thinking
Yeah.
we
it
would
would
be
be
in
good,
favor
but
of that.
there was no
I think
advantage
that's
or
a-
maybe a
I think
disadvantage
that's
in
a
a way.
legitimate thing to always keep open.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, we weren't
The
against
the
it.
possibility of having, someone like, I'll come back to that, Salem helping Marblehead.
Right.
Have someone like a Salem come in and provide.
If
Gloucester's done that multiple
To
times. They
Manchester.
did Rockport for a
It
long
doesn't work
time.
with-
then
and I think
Bradport got rid
Thorold-
of them because they didn't like them, Essex doesn't like them.
I think it's
not working
difficult.
well.
I think it's difficult for a smaller town to match up
It is.
with some
yeah.
of these larger
It is,
places
yeah.
because they
Yeah.
operate completely differently.
Yeah, but the expectation, I think, when you go under the, a group, consolidate with someone, one town expects, oh, I'm going to use all of these resources that they have. You can't do that. They're going to do their resources first. They're not going to take care of you. It doesn't work that way.
No, they just came, she
Yeah.
just came out and said she wouldn't be sending any maintenance, she wouldn't
Nope.
be sending any electricians, there wouldn't be any,
Nope.
nothing. It would be no different,
Yeah.
except that she would be in office.
Only
you know,
one day a week.
An hour away.
Yeah.
So it wasn't beneficial at this point. Maybe another time it would, and she was the only one that applied, so.
Yeah.
On the state funding, us not having access to state funds, I didn't get a sense that what I heard from him is basically, I need a project.
Yeah, that's what.
to talk on a general level
Uh-huh.
or more abstract.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have the, so I don't know what,
But he was gonna look at the funds available through the Housing Act and see
yes.
what flexibility there might be.
Well, I think we should
Smaller
move ahead with that RFP, and maybe Andrew DeFranza now will be excited
Might
about
be a
this.
little more.
Yeah.
And then we can tell that to,
Yeah.
How about as
take
a-
it somewhere.
As a topic for the next, one topic on the agenda is, let's start highlighting the housing RFP. It's been, I wouldn't say dormant, but in terms of discussion regarding the specifics of
We
an
need to bring it
RFP.
back around.
Let's start bringing that around and
Do we have, so there's been surveys and things, so do we have a better sense of like how much would be possible? You know, how the hang up before was not having the additional land and then work was done around the surrounding land. So is the thinking now, I know you talked to, can't remember the person's name from
Steve-
POA.
Steve
Oh, yeah, from
But
Concom, but also Alex.
Yeah.
Like, so is it more viable now if that land is in the
Well,
mix?
I think that one
I
of the
believe
things
so.
we did was change the zoning for Newport Park,
Oh, true.
so that can go to 4 stories.
Right.
And that was, in the first RFP, the feedback we received was the zoning was too restrictive.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I
But
think-
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And are we focusing on one site?
Say it again.
Excuse me, are we focusing on just one site this time?
I would say in the RFP, we still outline the 3 sites, but you could, and then you say language, something to the effect of you could apply for all or 1, 2, or 3, or any.
Okay.
You could,
Yep.
that is the key thing that,
Do you want to eliminate loading place and just do the senior ones?
I would put it out
Because
there.
they're more similar and loading place
As
is
long
a
as,
problem.
as long as
Yeah.
there's language not requiring the developer to do that, I would keep it in.
I just think it will turn some people off.
I
Well,
agree.
yeah, well, they don't apply to it. They'll maybe just apply for Newport, or maybe
No,
just
but
apply. We will never get unless we,
I
Yes.
think we need to fine tune it more.
Like you could, yeah, because you could package the other two together because they're closer in proximity,
Right.
which is usually a factor. They're similar like, you know,
Yeah.
some things. But
Right.
I think the trouble with adding the other site is there really isn't much
I do.
ability to add there, I guess, unless you did. But that's a much bigger thing if you were going to go up.
yeah. Well, that's,
Right.
this is all coming attractions.
Yeah,
For the
yeah,
next
for
meeting.
next break.
I think that's a good discussion points. We haven't had the opportunity to really sit down and go over it. You know,
And the zoning isn't different at the Plains, right?
Right.
Right, so then that's another factor.
but anything.
But there
about-
might be more appetite.
Is there
for
any other
variance.
to-do leaving this meeting with Senator Tarr and representatives that?
We need to be sure that they get the maps of the town, the
Thank you.
state-owned.
So state-owned land. Mark, are you still on?
Yeah, he said he was going to email it to
I'm,
him.
I'm here. I can show you the maps right now.
No, we've seen them. You don't have to do that right now. That's my opinion. The key takeaway is if you could, would you,
Send them to Peggy?
I was going to suggest,
Sure.
you have been,
Yeah, because I'm going to do the email.
you have been the
Understood.
conduit.
Yes.
Send
yes.
the map showing the 128 rest stop to
Well, I'm
Peggy.
not sure it's the rest stop.
It is.
It is.
It is?
Yeah, if it's a
There it is.
parcel between Pine and School, it's the old rest stop.
Yeah.
So send that map to Peggy, and then Peggy will reach out.
I'll share, yeah.
He sent
Sure.
those to us already. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Anything else on items?
So, trying to think. The MA, so we said, the MAPC piece, do we reach out about that?
Yeah, we should.
Just to kind of check in about what is out there for small communities, suburban
Yeah, forget,
communities.
I could probably find.
How could we get support for the housing authority or for the town if we wanted to do a housing?
We should try to at least have a liaison with a person. I don't know if they set up with people who are assigned to different towns.
Alex Kopelman, who works for the city of Gloucester now, used to work at MAPC, and I know him, so I could ask him who the right person would be.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, I think I know who to talk to. I did speak with someone at MAPC a couple months ago, but we never kind of followed it up anymore. So if you want, I can kind of reach out to them.
Sure.
The other thing is, I also spoke to, I know someone who is a housing planner. Basically, she works with developers as well as cities and towns on affordable housing. I also spoke with her, and she'd be willing to attend a meeting to discuss kind of plans and projects and funding with you as well. So
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Awesome.
I don't know.
Let's make that happen.
Okay, well, I'll coordinate with John about when the next meeting is. and
John isn't
try
going to be at the next meeting.
That's why I've used this word. Let's segue into
Yeah.
the next item, which is next meeting.
Oh.
I want to make a couple things clear. My time as an official member ends at the end of this month.
Correct.
Yes.
But my second point is I can still participate. It's not like, here comes John, I'm sorry, you can't come in.
No.
It's just that I can't be a voting member.
Right.
Well, and we don't know how long it'll take Eli to.
But it's still, he still can't do it because his term is up on June 30th.
Oh, I'm not doing, what I'm saying
but
is I
it's-
can't do
we're
anything
saying-
official.
right.
I can still show up as a public
Oh, yeah.
member.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
I can appear and do
And work
things.
behind the
Work
scenes.
in the same
Yeah.
way John Harden helped us out
Right.
early on.
Yeah.
I can help out.
It's
just-
like what you were saying earlier about the number of seats. You don't really need the seats. You can have people that add technical.
Just- yeah. But the distinction is I will not, as of, I think, June 30th, I won't be a voting member.
Right.
So that's the first thing. But then at the next meeting, to be determined, this committee would have to figure out who would be an able chairperson.
Right.
Right. All eyes. Everybody's looking at
I've got some good campaign slogans for anyone if you want to pursue this.
Well, that's sad.
I know,
Yeah,
it is.
So I'd like to say that since this is your last meeting as chair, I think we all are very appreciative of the hard work you've put into this over the years.
100%.
Maybe a little round of applause for
You certainly have spent an awful lot of time on it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I recognize that everyone who's sitting around here is spending a lot of time on other stuff that's related to the town. And I felt like I had to provide my service. Where, Sarah, is there a committee that you're not involved in? Muffin,
Yes,
what you
cultural
do.
council, maybe.
Chris,
Yeah.
so I felt like this was my area, and I was hoping to bring my expertise in
You
housing.
certainly
You
did.
did.
And the only thing that I rue is that I didn't apply my specific housing experience to an actual project.
No.
But again, I'm not
You're
going.
not going anywhere.
I just
You're
won't
just
be.
going over to.
I won't be a voting member.
Also, not for lack of trying, too. I mean,
No, really, no.
You've done a ton to try to get a project off the ground.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Well outside of meetings.
Yes.
On.
Whatever
your own.
goes
Well,
forward,
and
you
as
still-
the point of
we
our
still have his
meeting-
input.
Yeah.
As the point of the meeting today was, it's the state guidelines are stacked against us.
So when will our next meeting?
I guess it's not comes up anyway. Yeah.
The third Tuesday is the 15th, I think.
Of which I'm not available.
I can't.
Not gonna
Yeah.
be
We already have it
our
on.
portion. Doesn't matter.
I don't think so.
What's that?
That was my guess.
What's that?
I said I already put it down as my guess.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
It can happen, I'm just not available.
Yeah.
July 15th?
Yeah.
You want to aim for the 22nd?
Yeah, we could do it.
Yeah, we could have it on the 15th.
That's okay for me.
Well, since you're all just trying to get your next meeting going.
Oh,
I'm going to
yeah.
Excuse myself.
All right, I'll see you
I'm
tomorrow.
still
Thank you.
the chairperson, so I can comment. Do I hear a second on July 22nd?
Second.
I've heard that the 15th might be a difficulty.
Yeah.
For one person.
Yeah, but if the 22nd works for all people. Or are you just trying to?
Well, there's a really important concert in the park on the 22nd.
Oh, Tuesdays.
And that's why I can't do the 15th.
Oh, so Tuesdays,
Because I have to represent at the park.
so Tuesdays are bad in the summer.
In the summer.
Tuesdays are,
I don't really care. I mean, I could do either, so.
Would the committee want to shift one day to like a Wednesday, the
Wednesday?
23rd?
you have,
Because you've
Let's
got
do the
committee.
22nd.
We could do a Thursday.
Thursday, the 24th. July,
Or the 17th.
17th.
or the 17th.
On the 17th.
I have no dot on the 17th, which means it
you
must
have
be.
no dot.
No dot, it must be okay.
Well, get one on there, right now.
Peggy, does the
So
17th work?
if I-
Oh, yeah,
able
you're
to
not
come?
going.
No, I can't do the
You'll,
17th.
that will be unpleasant.
Let's do the 24th.
Having done that.
I haven't done it.
Let's do the 24th.
I'm putting it in here now.
Okay, 24th.
I'm glad you did that because I can make that date, whereas the 17th, Brandon, I will be a public, I'll be a resident, I will be in Wisconsin on the 17th.
Okay, done.
Okay. July 24.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to give the Housing Authority opportunity to close its portion of the meeting.
So we don't have a quorum.
We don't even have a quorum, so.
Yeah.
So,
Done.
then,
We're never gonna.
do I have a motion to adjourn the Affordable Housing Trust?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, great.
John, thank you for everything.
Yeah.
Gail, thank you very much, Gail.
All done.
Thanks,
Gail.
Thanks.
You're welcome.